There is a single skill, and only one, that separates people who seem almost impossible to wound from everyone else who gets knocked flat by the same ordinary insults, betrayals, and disappointments that life hands out to everybody equally. It is not thicker skin. It is not simply not caring. It is something far more precise, something Epictetus discovered while literally enslaved, something Marcus Aurelius practiced daily while ruling an empire that constantly tried to provoke him. Once you genuinely master this single skill, the specific kind of hurt that comes from other people's words and actions stops having anywhere left to land. Today, we are going to walk through exactly what this skill is, why it works on almost anyone who genuinely practices it, and exactly how to build it, piece by piece, starting today. Stay with me until the end, because the final piece of this skill is the one that makes everything else in this video actually stick, rather than remaining simply an interesting idea you understood once and never actually applied. Welcome back to Accent Stoic, the channel where ancient philosophy meets the battles of modern life. If you're new here, welcome. You've arrived at exactly the right moment. And if you've been here before, you already know what we do. We go into the meditations of Marcus Aurelius, the letters of Seneca, and the discourses of Epictetus, and we pull out what has survived 2,000 years because it actually works. If that's what you're here for, hit subscribe now, because this video addresses something almost everyone wishes they had already mastered. The skill itself. Separating the event from the story you tell about it. Epictetus wrote the single sentence that this entire video is built around, and it deserves to be read slowly because its simplicity hides just how radical it actually is. Men are disturbed not by things, but by their opinions about things. Here is what this means with total precision. The event itself, the insult, the betrayal, the rejection, the loss, is neutral. It happened. It cannot be undone or argued away. But the actual experience of being hurt by that event does not come directly from the event itself. It comes from the interpretation you construct around it, almost always within a fraction of a second, so quickly that the interpretation and the event feel like a single, indivisible experience, rather than two genuinely separate things. The skill this entire video is built around is the ability to notice this gap, examine what's actually happening inside it, and in many cases revise the interpretation before it fully hardens into the emotional experience of being hurt. This is not a claim that painful things don't happen, or that you should pretend they don't matter. Seneca wrote extensively about genuine loss and genuine wrongdoing, and he never argued that these things were somehow illusory or unimportant. What he argued, along with every other major Stoic voice, is that the specific experience of being hurt, the wound that lingers, that replays itself, that shapes your mood for days afterward, is produced primarily by the story you construct about the event, not by the event alone. Two people can experience the exact same betrayal and walk away with almost entirely different amounts of lasting damage, depending entirely on the interpretation each one builds around what happened. Consider two people who each learn that a close friend spoke about them unkindly behind their back. The first person constructs a story around this event that expands rapidly. This confirms that I was never really valued by this person, that I cannot trust anyone, that this reveals something humiliating and permanent about how I'm perceived by everyone who knows me. The second person, experiencing the exact same original event, constructs a considerably narrower story. This friend said something unkind in a specific moment, likely reflecting their own frustration or insecurity in that moment, and it says something about a single lapse in their judgment rather than a permanent verdict on the entire friendship or on my own worth. The event was identical. The lasting damage each person carries afterward is almost entirely a function of which story they built, not of what actually happened. Piece 1. Catch the story before it hardens into fact. Piece of mastering this skill is learning to notice the gap between an event and your interpretation of it in real time while it's actually happening, rather than only in calm hindsight long after the moment has passed. Epictetus taught a concept called fantasia. The raw initial impression that strikes the mind the instant something happens. Someone says something cutting. Someone doesn't return your call. Someone chooses someone else over you. In that first instant, before any conscious thought has fully formed, your mind receives a raw impression of the event. The crucial insight is that there exists a gap, however brief, between that raw impression and the moment you grant it full assent, the moment you accept the interpretation as simply, obviously true, and begin experiencing the emotional consequences that follow from it. People never notice this gap because it closes so quickly that impression and interpretation feel identical. The practice here is deliberately slowing down enough to notice it. When something happens that stings, try pausing, even for a single breath, and asking directly what actually happened, in the most neutral possible terms, versus what story am I already telling myself about what it means. Marcus Aurelius practiced this constantly, writing to himself about examining an impression honestly before accepting it as fact. This single pause, practiced consistently, is the entry point for everything else this video is going to build on. Piece 2. Build an identity that doesn't depend on external verdicts. The second piece addresses something the first piece alone cannot fully solve. Even once you notice the gap between event and interpretation, you need somewhere stable to stand while you examine it. This is where the Stoic concept of the inner citadel becomes essential. Marcus Aurelius wrote about retreating into a stable, settled sense of self that exists independent of external praise, criticism, or circumstance. He described this as a fortress that cannot be stormed by anyone else's words, because it was never built out of material that other people's opinions could actually reach. Most people, without realizing it, have built significant portions of their sense of self-worth out of exactly this vulnerable material. How others see them, whether they're praised or criticized, whether specific relationships or achievements go the way they hoped. A citadel requires genuine, deliberate work conducted in private, well before any specific hurtful moment arrives. It is built through honest self-examination, genuinely knowing your own values, your own character, your own sense of what you consider worthwhile, independent of anyone else's confirmation of it. A person who has done this work has somewhere stable to retreat to the moment an insult or betrayal arrives. A person who has not done this work finds that the insult has nowhere else to land except directly on an identity that was always, in some sense, borrowed from other people's opinions to begin with. Practical way to test how sturdy your own inner citadel currently is. Consider a piece of criticism or rejection you experienced recently, and notice honestly how much of the resulting pain came from the specific content of what was said versus how much came from a broader, more diffuse feeling that your entire sense of worth had been called into question by it. If a single piece of criticism from a single person was capable of shaking your broader sense of self-worth, this reveals with real precision that the citadel in that particular area has not yet been built on solid enough ground. This is not a permanent verdict. It is simply useful information about where the deliberate work of self-examination still needs to happen before the next difficult moment arrives and tests it again. Piece 3. Premeditate difficulty, so it never arrives as a genuine shock. Third piece of this skill addresses something that compounds hurt considerably beyond what the original event alone would produce. The specific shock of feeling blindsided, as though this particular pain violated some unspoken guarantee that life was supposed to honor. The Stoics practiced premeditatio malorum, the calm, deliberate anticipation of adversity, not to produce anxiety, but specifically to remove the element of surprise from difficulties that eventually arrive, regardless of whether you were prepared for them. Marcus Aurelius began many mornings reminding himself that the people he would encounter that day might be difficult, dishonest, or unkind, not as pessimism, but as a form of psychological armor. When difficulty inevitably arrived, it did not violate an expectation of ease. It simply confirmed something he had already, calmly, made peace with in advance. Peace matters enormously for the specific goal of never being hurt again, because so much of the intensity of emotional pain comes not from the difficulty itself, but from the added shock of feeling that this difficulty shouldn't have happened, that it represents some unfair violation of how things were supposed to go. A mind that has already calmly considered the genuine possibility of betrayal, loss, or disappointment meets these events when they eventually arrive, without that additional layer of shock, which often turns out to be responsible for a considerable portion of the total pain experienced. Piece 4. Relocate your investment from outcomes to character. The fourth piece addresses a specific, common source of hurt that has nothing to do with cruelty or betrayal at all: the pain of investing heavily in an outcome that simply does not materialize despite genuine effort and good intentions. Distinguished sharply between virtue, which they considered the only true good and entirely within your control, and external outcomes, which they called preferred indifference. Genuinely worth pursuing, but never worth making your peace of mind dependent on. Seneca wrote about the difference between a good decision and a good outcome, noting that these two things, while often aligned, are not actually the same, and that genuine peace requires locating your sense of worth in the first category rather than the second. Peace asks you to examine honestly how much of your current emotional pain traces back to an outcome that didn't happen the way you hoped, rather than to any genuine wrongdoing by another person. If you can say honestly that you brought genuine effort and integrity to a situation, the outcome not materializing the way you hoped is disappointing, but it does not have to constitute a wound to your actual worth, because your worth was never actually supposed to be staked on that outcome in the first place. Relocating your investment from outcomes you cannot fully control to character you can fully control removes an enormous source of unnecessary hurt that has nothing to do with anyone else's cruelty at all. Piece 5. See the other person's behavior as information about them, not a verdict about you. It addresses situations that do involve another person's genuine cruelty, unkindness, or betrayal, and it requires the most emotional discipline of anything in this video, because it asks you to reframe someone else's harmful behavior as revealing something about their own character rather than delivering an accurate verdict about your worth. Aurelius wrote about approaching difficult people with the understanding that their behavior very often reflects their own confusion, insecurity, or suffering, rather than any accurate assessment of the person they're directing it toward. This is not the same as excusing genuine wrongdoing, and the Stoics were never soft on accountability. It is a genuine reframe of what someone's cruelty actually reveals. A person who insults you is showing you something true about their own character, their own internal state, their own relationship to kindness and self-control. They are not delivering an objective, accurate report about your actual worth, however forcefully or convincingly their words might be delivered. Matters because a significant portion of lasting hurt comes from unconsciously treating other people's harmful behavior as evidence about your own value rather than evidence about theirs. Once you genuinely separate these two things, their behavior reveals their character, not yours. An insult or betrayal, however unpleasant in the moment, stops carrying the specific kind of lasting wound that comes from believing it said something true and damaging about who you actually are. Worth applying to a specific memory rather than only as an abstract idea. Think of a moment someone said something genuinely cruel to you, and notice honestly which story you built afterward. If the story centered on what their words revealed about you, that you were somehow deserving of that treatment, that it confirmed some hidden inadequacy, you were treating their behavior as a verdict rather than as information. If instead the story centered on what their words revealed about them, their own capacity for cruelty in that moment, their own struggle with self-control, their own unresolved pain being directed outward, you were applying exactly the reframe this piece describes. The words spoken were identical in both cases. The lasting wound depends entirely on which direction the interpretation actually pointed. Piece 6. Practice the full sequence until it becomes automatic. Arrived at the final piece, the one that makes everything else in this video actually work, rather than remaining simply an interesting idea you understood once and never applied under real pressure. Seneca compared the cultivation of Stoic character to physical training, noting that no athlete becomes strong through a single, however intense, effort. The 5 pieces we've covered: catching the story before it hardens, building an identity independent of external verdicts, premeditating difficulty, relocating investment from outcomes to character, and seeing cruelty as information about the aggressor rather than a verdict about yourself, do not become genuinely available to you under real pressure simply because you understood them once, watching a video. They become available through repeated practice, applied specifically in the ordinary, ongoing moments of daily life, long before the genuinely difficult moment that actually tests them arrives. This final piece asks you to treat this entire skill the way the Stoics treated every other discipline in their tradition, as ascesis, deliberate, repeated training, practiced specifically in small, low-stakes moments, so that it is genuinely available when a larger, more painful moment eventually arrives. The person who has practiced catching the story behind small, daily frustrations will find this same skill available during genuine betrayal. The person who has only understood the concept intellectually, without ever practicing it in the smaller moments, will find that understanding evaporates precisely when the pressure is highest and the skill is needed most. Bringing it all together. Can look at what we've actually built today. One central skill, separating the event from the story you tell about it, built through 6 pieces, catching the interpretation before it hardens, building an inner citadel independent of external verdicts, premeditating difficulty so it never arrives as genuine shock, relocating your investment from outcomes to character, seeing other people's cruelty as information about them rather than a verdict about you, and finally, practicing the entire sequence repeatedly until it becomes available under real pressure rather than only in calm reflection. Deeper truth behind the promise in this video's title. You will never actually become a person who experiences no pain at all. The Stoics never promised that, and anyone claiming to offer it is not describing genuine Stoic philosophy. What they offered instead, and what this single skill genuinely delivers once mastered, is something considerably more valuable. The end of unnecessary compounded suffering that comes from unexamined interpretation, an identity built on borrowed approval, unprepared shock, misplaced investment, and mistaking other people's cruelty for an accurate verdict about your own worth. The event still happens. The genuinely unnecessary layers of suffering built on top of it, layer by layer, are what this skill removes. Here is your challenge for tonight. Not 6 challenges, just one. Think of the specific situation in your life right now most likely to hurt you in the coming days or weeks. A difficult relationship, a predictable disappointment, a recurring source of pain. Choose just one of these 6 pieces and decide right now, in advance, how you will apply it the next time that situation arrives. Not perfectly, just once, sincerely, and notice what changes, both in the situation itself and in how much of it you carry afterward. Marcus Aurelius did not develop this kind of composure overnight, despite ruling the most powerful empire in the ancient world, surrounded by people who tested him constantly. He practiced it every single day in the private pages of a journal he never intended anyone else to read. That same practice, built one honestly examined moment at a time, is available to you starting with the very next moment that tries to hurt you. I gave you something today, hit the like button. It costs nothing, and it tells us this kind of depth is exactly what you want more of. Leave a comment and tell me honestly, which of these 6 pieces do you think you need to practice the most? I read every comment on this channel, and I'll be down there with you. Subscribe to Accent Stoic if you haven't already. We go this deep